But yeah, we're gonna be going through examples of educational games that are educational in ways that people might not think they are, or just educational games in general. But we would like other people to think about games that they know of that fit into these categories, and we'd like to hear them too, because it'd be nice to just so that way we're using this as examples, so that way people can know what to do, like what works, what's been helping educate people out there. So if anyone else has any examples, we'd love to hear them after, and share them with everyone else. So I guess it's 10 o'clock now. So let's begin. All right. So I am Jesse. This is Charlotte. We have a studio called C63 Industries. We have done educational games for schools, just as a side work as we work on our own game, which also has educational aspects to it. But we have seen a lot of people doing educational games. We have seen stuff that schools want, and we disagree with a lot of stuff that's out there. And we will talk to you about why and what works and what we think doesn't work.
So thank you to everyone who came out to the Sunday morning panel. I can tell that you're actually very dedicated to learning about this topic. Most people are probably not awake right now. But yeah, we'll go through a lot of stuff about educational games and what you can do to make a quality educational game aside from just having a quality game in general.
All right. So, what is an educational game? This is simple. An educational game is a game that educates the player about one or more subjects. This can be many little things. It could be something like, I don't know, Math Blaster, it's just teaching you math, or something more elaborate that you may not realize is being taught to you.
I want to say if you had an educational game to teach people about what educational games are, you don't want to have this kind of response. This is like what when you're in elementary school and you're like filling out an exam. It's like repeat the question and then give a very simple definition. But I'm sure everybody has seen educational games on some subject where the material is kind of like that. So this is an example of what not to do.
Yes, this is your school book answer to the question. All right, so there are problems with educational games out there. Most people don't want to play an educational game. They don't want to play an educational game because an educational game is a negative term. People don't want to buy educational games. It's just a negative thing. And they don't want to buy educational games because educational games focus too much on being educational, not enough on being fun.
Yeah, it is sadly true that most people love learning. There's all kinds of literature out there about how people enjoy games with hard challenges or where they're picking up a skill or learning about a topic. But there have been so many poor quality or poorly designed educational games out there that it has become a bad term. And I'm sure everybody has their own examples that could be brought up. But I think about something like, I really like the space program. There's so many great topics out there, like fascinating stories and stuff. And I've seen so many terrible games about stuff like the space shuttle, the early space program and stuff like that. They just like dryly repeat the material to you. Like, we're going to read this manual about how to operate this space shuttle simulation. And it's not that the technical aspects of it are not fun. It's just that you can present them in a way that makes it more, less like just reading a manual. Even people that are going, say you're learning to drive a car, you don't just sit there and read the owner's manual for the car. You go out with people and you practice driving and you make mistakes, you get some dents, but it's a better experience, a better learning experience than just sitting there and reading the book that you pick up at the DMV or whatever about here's how you get your driver's license.
Also, just a quick thing. I see a lot of new people just came in. Again, we are going to be going through examples of educational games and games that are educational ways you might not have thought of. And we would love it if other people would chime in with examples afterwards. So please think about game examples so that way everyone can share and we all learn together. All right. So we're going to start examples of educational games. And this might get a bit rambly, but that's hopefully you'll learn. So, Oregon Trail, the original educational game for a lot of people. Like everyone remembers Oregon Trail. So, here's the thing about Oregon Trail though. How many people remember a city from Oregon Trail? One person. Two people if you count her. how, do you remember two cities from Oregon Trail? I actually don't know because I don't know either.
Those are believable sounding names, so I'll take that. I'll take that answer.
But so, what did Oregon Trail teach people? Exactly. It actually taught you diseases more than anything else, like dysentery and all the other fun diseases, and how you kill your friends. But no one remembers. Right, before the river, the grand finale. That's another thing people remember. But or just shooting like the pain or the easy, depending on what your platform was, shooting mechanics in the game. But people don't remember the actual history with the Oregon Trail. They don't remember where it went to or any of this other stuff. So did it fail as an educational game, or did it teach something that it wasn't intending to, such as dysentery? I believe, yes, I believe they were.
Yeah, I guess at its core mechanic, Oregon Trail was a resource management game, and it was to emphasize you can do all this planning, buy your supplies and all that, and then you're still going to die of dysentery. So, yeah, I remember. I'm going to use this as an example of it's not the material; it's how they make the game. As the Oregon Trail series improved, like I don't know how many people played Oregon Trail 2 and 3, and I think they had other ones, but I stopped around there. The experience was a lot better, and I actually learned a lot more from Oregon Trail 2, not only because it had stuff like pictures and video and audio, but uh, I had a lot more interactivity, I think, than the original Oregon Trail did, and it tried to be more realistic with things like the hunting and so on. So that was a lot more memorable game, and it gave me more of that sense of experience of what was it actually like for people living during that time. And if that was their goal to teach that, then these sequels did a better job, because you don't really get that from the original Oregon Trail. It's just it's hard, and then you die randomly.
And the original one is what I think most people played. So they seem to have succeeded better at their later attempts, but most people just know the first one. And yeah, what did we all learn? We learned about dysentery. Probably our first big fancy word. Okay, moving on to the other side of the spectrum, a more recent game, Kerbal Space Program. How many people here have played Kerbal Space Program? How many people here have tried to play Kerbal Space Program? But you all roughly probably know somewhat about it. Now, this is an educational game because you're learning about orbital mechanics, you're learning about physics, you're learning about all this stuff. But this is stuff you also need to know to play the game. It's like such the extreme end that it doesn't really make it open to people. It's just, hey, unless you want to sit there and put a bunch of rockets on the launch pad and blow up a test pilot, which I get the feeling that's what you were doing. But look at the elaborate thing that is in this picture, and all these sensors and switches. Yeah, you're building your own simulator in a sense. But just people. Yeah, just general people. Like, ah,
Yeah, it was meant to be a fun game. I don't think it was sold to people as we're going to teach you how a rocket works, how to get to space, and so on. I think it was just like, hey, you can have fun launching these little green men to the moon. Like that's kind of how I saw it sold anyway. But it is or can be an extremely elaborate, difficult game, and I think a lot of people it has a high learning curve. A lot of people seem to struggle with it at first, and basically just have to follow tutorials on like, okay, here's how you make your first rocket and get up into space and things like that. But there is so much that's thrown at you at once with it.
you get to build space stations in this. You have to do the physics of building a space station, getting it out into space, putting it together, then sending ships out into space, docking with it, bringing it supplies, all with like real-ish physics. And all right, thank you. But yeah, so this is like two completely opposite ends of the spectrum, but both kind of fail at being an educational game because the first one, although people enjoyed it, what did you really learn from it other than dysentery? And then the second one, you need to know way too, like you already know about physics by the time you can do things to enjoy this game. Yes. No, that's true. It does. But that's if you want to get interested and play it, because again, you can be way overwhelmed and just be like, "I give up on this," which seems to be the attitude a lot of people do have with those games, with Kerbal anyway, and with Oregon, it's just the whole "I may never make it to Oregon City" at the end. So there's another city in Oregon Trail. There are school computers with Kerbal Space Program on it. Whether or not it's in there to teach kids is another story. I will say I don't think we have a single actual bad game on this list. But like this is supposed to be examples of things that you at least do learn something from. All right, so the next game, EVE Online. I'm sure everyone here at least knows of EVE Online if you haven't played it. How many people here have been absorbed into the world of EVE Online at one point in their lives? So there's a lot to say about EVE Online. Like there's several things you can say, educational aspect, but probably the most focused one is the market. It is as close to a real stock market as you can get. And this may not be something that you're trying to educate kids in school on, but it's still something that people are interested in doing and want to learn about. And this is a way for people to actually play a real life stock market with real people with completely no way of knowing, no prediction whatsoever, because like you can have a war and the price on a resource may go up just like in real life. They actually have like people with PhDs in financing and all that at CCP for this game to make sure like the game economy doesn't crash and stuff like that. It is really as close to a real economy as you can get in a virtual setting. And because of that, it does teach economics. It does teach resources and like figuring out, how to mine moons and, budgeting your time and budgeting your money and all this other stuff. It's pretty much you're playing entrepreneur with real people.
I think that EVE Online, which is a MMO for people that may not have heard of it, was one of the first games I remember hearing about where they hired actual economists to work on their system in the game, their market system, to make sure that it was as realistic as possible. And he was talking about that their economy ends up having a real world effect. This being a subscription based MMO, people trade in-game goods for time in the game. Like people will buy subscription cards and trade those with people for in-game goods. So some people finance playing the game through the stuff that they create in the game. And people like the thing that's unique about this versus your World of Warcraft type game that has an auction system or things like that. Everything in their market is player driven. Players do everything from mine the ore to create the space stations. So it's all pretty much dependent on them. There's a little bit of P versus E interaction, like with people can do quests to earn money in the game, but other than that, everything is just completely player to player interactions. So that's what makes it really fascinating and educational about how economics work.
Another thing to point out that makes it different from other games is that everything is sold at that spot. It's not like you can sell something at one space station and then buy it at another space station. No, you actually have to go to that space station it's being sold at and pick it up. This means that there is areas where there's demand for certain goods. There's other areas where you can get the expensive goods and bring it to like safer places. So just like real life, places. All right, let's just use salmon for example. You live in the state of Washington. Salmon's much cheaper, than someplace like here because that's where they're fishing it. So just like real life, you have goods that are cheaper in some places and more expensive in the other, and then you have your own people who take it from one place to the other and make a profit off of it. So just another way of, it's a very realistic economy type situation where you can learn. And with the safety of it being a video game, you're not risking your real life money here, unless you have like 5 accounts, like some people I know. All right, another one is Minecraft. Now this one, it's huge. Everyone knows of Minecraft. It's like they even have an educational edition that's in schools and stuff like that. But like people go into Minecraft, they're like, okay, I'm gonna build a house. I'm gonna slay a zombie. Next thing you know, you're building this most elaborate system with redstone and TNT and levers and stuff like that. And that's actually circuitry. That's logic. You're learning how to actually do stuff like logic chips in Minecraft. It's like it gets broken down to its simplest form of true and false, but this is how people have built actual computers in the world of Minecraft, is through this basic circuitry. And because kids want to, or even adults, they want to be like, I want to build this really fancy elaborate thing where, I pull this lever, it opens the door for me, but if there's a zombie on the pressure plate, it's not going to open the door, it's going to blow up the TNT at the door, and this is not only is this teaching logic, and circuitry, it's also teaching programming. So you go into this like, oh yeah, I'm going to, get a diamond sword and wail on a skeleton, but next thing you know, you're actually programming, doing circuitry, things like that you can take into other scenarios.
Yeah, and Minecraft is one of those games where I think like our slide kind of illustrates here, it ends up becoming something different than what you expect. People go in, I guess, expecting exploration and adventure, but you get to a point where there's really not much else to do other than start trying to build stuff and do more elaborate things in the game in order to move forward or to have something new to do. So that's an interesting aspect of it, I think, as an educational game.
And Minecraft is huge. So you have servers with lots of people playing, people making traps on to each other, and this is just encouraging it. It is keeping it a dynamic world, so it doesn't become stale. It's not like, oh, I got the perfect zombie trap here. No, it encourages creative thinking of how can I make a better trap, because now this person is trolling me by spawning like 3 zombies at my door instead of having the trap for 1 zombie. So now I have to come up with something that can fight 3 zombies. And And it's just done in a safe video game environment, but it's teaching kids how to have. Not only are they having fun, but they're creative thinking. They're doing logic. Doing programming, and yeah. There's actually a huge modding scene for Minecraft, and it's not like elaborate stuff either. You could, because Minecraft is essentially a world, you could easily create like almost a script, like simple scripts to do something like make your own games in it. So, like if someone wants to just learn basic Java, they could just get started with just making games in an existing game like Minecraft. And did I see someone with their hand up, or I guess not.
Yeah, in addition to the modding community, there is a lot that you can do within just a Minecraft, as a stock Minecraft, to make games, to make elaborate maps and so on. Such as you in the back were mentioning, you can make maps to teach people certain concepts. Or so I see plenty of people have made their own maps and servers that have an additional game aspect on top of Minecraft. Not to mention all the people that have modified it, as Jesse was mentioning.
Right, and there is like people were doing things like making adventure maps, and even though that, like, even before there were ways of like stopping people from destroying blocks, people were still following these rules. That's like, here you play this map and you're not allowed to touch any blocks, and people would still do that and play the map and you know do whatever the map wanted them to do. All right. So moving on from Minecraft, which there is a lot to talk about with Minecraft, so it's good that we did that. All right, Fold It. How many people here have actually heard of Fold It? Wow, that's quite a few. Usually, I don't get that kind of response, but so Fold It is a game where you are doing protein folding, actual protein folding, like this. Laboratories will create the protein like what you create in Fold It, and there has already what was it that was some like the community already created a cure of or something like that through Fold It. But yeah, something was cured thanks to this game. We'll just leave it at that. I don't remember the details, but so this one looks straight up as an educational game, and in a way it was sold as one, but it was also sold as a community crowdsourcing type game. But the thing that makes people play it, other than like just wanting to help out, but the thing that makes a lot of people play it other than that is the competitiveness of it. It has leaderboards, it has competition, and that is something that is a tool that can actually get people to be really invested in something. And like other examples such as EVE Online, one of the reasons people would focus on something like the economy in that is to compete to make the money, and just like people in real life probably compete to make the money. It's the same thing just in a virtual game, and in this it's trying to compete to get the points, who can come up with the best folded protein. And the nice thing with this is that if they actually come up with something great, well, that's going to help people, like actual people in the world, thanks to curing diseases and stuff like that, which is great. But it's the competitiveness that really helps keep it going, other than just the niceness of people.
From what I can find, I don't think a disease was cured with Fold It, but they did find out how an enzyme in HIV works thanks to it. And that's the kind of data I think that they're looking for from Fold It. Because if you tell a computer to model all the different ways that a protein can fold, it's kind of like having a computer play chess. If it explores all the billions of possible moves, it's going to take a really long time at current processing power, and that's one of those things where you can use a person to shortcut that process, and Fold It has very cleverly taken advantage of that. I had the question of, do people actually learn biochemistry? Do they learn about proteins from Fold It? And it appears that the answer is yes, that players have actually given scientists feedback about how to improve the protein modeling and fold it based on what they learned playing the game.
Oh no. Hang on. I got the power thing here. All right. I'll talk more about folded while you do that. But yeah, so everything is real. It's uh everything is in folded is real. It's actually how you know how science will do this stuff. It's real protein, real folding, real stuff like that. So it's actually teaching you biochemistry. So that's something else you get out of it. All right. Moving on. It's still good? Okay. Here's another one. Pokemon. I'm sure everyone here has heard of Pokemon, especially thanks to the new Pokemon Go. But one thing that, is kind of often overlooked is that the developers of Pokemon decided to grab an existing alphabet for their in-game, their like secret little in-game alphabet, and it happened to be Braille. So kids ended up going off and learning Braille thanks to Pokemon. Now this is kind of like, I don't know how useful learning Braille is to a lot of people, and I mean, obviously if you're blind it's important, but outside of that I don't know how important it is. But this is just an example of how you can make a fun game and put something little, like a little thing in it, like I'm going to put some like actual Braille in it, and it'll, by doing that, it teaches something else. So you could just create something fun and addicting that people want to play and just put educational stuff in there, and people will pick it up and learn it. And it makes the game educational even if the game isn't being sold or looked at as an educational game.
Yeah, as for the value of learning Braille, you can argue that there is a value in learning how to learn, and like learning things as practice, as a hobby. Like, yeah, people get very invested in things like learning the rules of a board game. Is that have any real world use? Well, you pick up the practical skill of learning things and applying, interpreting, and applying what you learn. But as far as Braille specifically, I think we decided people don't really realize how much Braille there is out there and how important the knowledge of that is for people that depend on that. So it is, if anybody did learn Braille from this and remember that actually is useful, that you can pay attention to what Braille stuff there is out there. You might see some unexpected messages if you ever go around trying to read Braille signs. That can be interesting. But I think this is a good example of how you can people can learn interesting things when they get invested in a puzzle or in a story in a game, and this could be used for a lot of purposes. If someone wanted to do this in a game, say you wanted to teach someone a different language, that if you turned it into a puzzle of it's trying to complete this game that they're invested in, that it will be a lot more engaging than just telling people straightforward, okay, you're going to learn Braille today, because they'll be like, well, why? I'm sighted. Why do I need to learn Braille? But you can be surprised at the uses of learning things like that as well.
And yes. Yeah, that's actually a good point, is people might just go up and find the solution versus actually learning how to solve it, or learning how to read it to the solution. And I don't really know if
you can say on one hand they're learning their internet research skills, but as a programmer, one possible solution is procedurally generating content so that they actually have to learn how to solve the puzzle instead of learning the specific solution to the puzzle. Because that could always be an issue when you have what I call canned puzzles, that they can brute force it and get through things just by trial and error, and they don't really pick up the skill of how to solve the puzzle. So one possibility would be force them to learn to solve the puzzles by throwing randomly generated content at them. To some extent, they also just have to want to learn. You can't always force people to want to pick up those skills if they really only just care about saying they beat the game or whatever. I will say maybe something that people can do as a game designer is find some way to instill into the students this the value of actually learning how to solve the puzzle rather than looking up the solution. And you could try things like, if anyone's ever played those very old text-based games where you had to use a manual to complete the game, they had little tricks in there. Like if you're not going to the correct pages, you're just like flipping through the manuals, you'll see weird things in there that are incorrect and mess up your experience of the game. So you could possibly come up with modern equivalents of that to try to ensure that people are actually doing the work. But maybe it would be better there's some way that you can give them a sense of it's good for you to actually try and to learn in your game.
All right. Moving on. All right. So this might be too violent for some kids out there, but how many people played Assassin's Creed 2? How many people remember the way that it was popping between Latin and Italian throughout the game? How many people felt like they could speak Italian after they played that game? Yeah. They do that with a lot of games, actually. They will go out there and they will map out, and they may skip something like some back alleys, but overall they get the majority of it down to a T. I won't go there. But getting back onto the actual slide, no, but it's a way of teaching Italian or Latin in this. They use Latin and Italian, but you could swap out any other language in there, and the way, like, even I know that there's the whole, you can watch foreign movies or you can, pick up stuff that way. But in this, because people get invested in the story, and the way it does it, where it's like, we're going to speak English, but then we're just going to have this one sentence be Italian. But because of that, you still pick up the context. You still pick up, like, what the words are meaning. And, like, I actually felt like I could speak Italian afterwards. I didn't, but it's just like I was just so invested in this. And, when you binge on it and hear Italian for, like, 3 days straight, you just feel like you know it. And you have the whole concept of, if you have a certain language being spoken around you enough, especially if you're a child, you actually start picking it up. I forget what the term for that is, but immersion. Yes, thank you.
So I'm sure everybody has known somebody who is like, I really like this manga or whatever. I want to go read the original Japanese one or find ones that aren't translated and translate that. So that kind of thing can happen, but I feel like it's different having it in a video game where you have some kind of interactivity that adds a different aspect to learning it. I don't know, maybe this is not a great example where a lot of it is just like passively following along with cinematics or so on, but you could have a mechanic in a game where it's like you're picking up words over time, and then you start having to select dialogue that uses those words that you've learned and so on. It's kind of funny that sometimes people will see something like a historical game or historical drama, and then they say, well, I want to know how realistic that was. I want to learn what really happened. So that's an interesting effect that comes out of these things.
Makes me curious if when Assassin's Creed first came out, how many people Googled Templar and were kind of disappointed thinking that they were going to find Assassin's Creed information and end up reading about all these Crusade stories. But hey, they still probably learned some fascinating stuff.
Yeah. You were thinking Crusade stuff. I was thinking that you type Templar into Google and you're going to see all these conspiracy theories The Masons are still among us. That kind of stuff.
I makes me feel sorry for anyone who's actually studying this. All right. So in conclusion, or in summary, if you want people to enjoy your game, don't start with the education aspect. Start with the gameplay itself. Make it fun at first, then add education to it. As you can see from a lot of these examples, they are fun games that had education added to them, whether intentional or non-intentional. People were still learning things, like the Assassin's Creed example. It was a fun game, but we even talked about how geographically it was like the real cities, and that teaches things. And this is especially important when you're making a game for children, because children probably are not going to want to be as thinking they're going to get a benefit out of playing an education game that's bad. They want to play something fun. So make a fun game, then put the education in it.
And I hope we gave some examples of different ways that you can make a fun game here. There's not necessarily a right or wrong. It just depends on who you want to appeal to, what kind of genre of game you want to make. There's some examples that we didn't go very deeply into where there are plenty of games where you're kind of getting achievements or leaderboard points or whatever for going through educational material, that it's still interactive, but there's a lot less focus on gameplay mechanics. It's more just like, I'm memorizing this material in order to gain an achievement, like Khan Academy, Duolingo. Those are examples of very popular and simple games, because they kind of are like games where you're just trying to get through the material to get an achievement or competing to get the highest score in the material. So it just depends on what your goal is, but even those kind of games do have a fun aspect to them that appeals to a certain kind of sense of fun that some people have in order to get people into the game first. Even if they're going in for the material, they're still choosing to play this game rather than just read a textbook, because you can go find all kinds of free textbooks online for these different subjects, for like math or whatever, but instead they're choosing to go to Khan Academy and kind of play the game in order to get the achievement that says, I learned this stuff.
All right. So yeah, I just want to thank you for I'm still want to talk to people, get questions, anything else like that. So I saw you had your hand raised, and that is good additional information for anyone else who is making a game related to education too. Like you don't have to follow what we're saying, but you can do it other ways. It's just we're just trying to stress, make sure there's some fun element in there. Don't just make it like a dry textbook in video game form. And anyone who has probably looked at educational games, worked out of school, things like that, have probably seen plenty of games that are like that. And those just do not work with children and adults and anyone else. You really need to focus on the fun. And that's the most important part of making an educational game. Anyone else have questions or anything else they'd like to say? I think we're almost out of time. Yes, we do. And so right now we actually have a game in the indie cluster. If you want to come take a look at it, it's a fun game that has educational added to it. However, we also have done games for things like schools and nothing that people would possibly know, but like we were like local school districts were like, hey, we have a need to make a game that teaches this. Here's what we want. And we're like, this is not going to be fun. And there's a big clash of opinions here. And it made us realize that there's a lot of poor opinions in this kind of environment, that people need to realize that you need to make your game fun if you want to use it for learning. It's like, our students are lagging behind in this subject or this topic, and we need something that teaches this exact thing. Don't make a worksheet, but we want this. We think this is a good idea, but this, and it's like, but this isn't a fun game mechanic, and
Right. They basically gave us material from a worksheet or like make this into a game but not a worksheet. That's interesting. But to answer your question, no, we haven't been asked specifically for that. We were just told to make a game that has these rigid requirements met in it. That's been our experience anyway with dealing with schools. And for making our own educational games, we'd like to take the approach of, I guess, teaching more broad concepts and then having optional specific educational aspects in there.
um, is the next panel here, or are they waiting for us? I was just curious because it's already 11. Yeah. Okay. Oh, the next one's 11:30. Oh, I thought it was 11. All right. I just wasn't sure if what was going on. So, all right, but yeah, I guess that's it. Unless anyone has, yeah. All right. And yeah, we're in the indie cluster. So if anyone wants to come by and talk and look around, talk to each other to share knowledge.